Right guys, welcome back to the channel, welcome back to another video. In this one I'm just going to be showing you how to cut down your carbon fork steerer tube. So let's go ahead, let's run through the steps. Right, so here we have the fork, like I said, carbon steerer tube, carbon fork. So we want to cut this down. So if you've got a frame or you purchase a new bike and you want to know how to cut it down, then I'll go ahead and show you. But the component parts, obviously what we got with the fork, the stem, we got the compression plug for the fork, you can see, and then the actual headset itself. So the component parts of the headset, top and bottom bearing there, and then we got the spacers go below your stem as well, and any shims as well there, and the top cap. So that's all the parts involved in it. So what I'll do is I'll offer this up and just show you how to cut it down if you have to. Right, so to get the height to mark it, to be able to cut the steerer tube down, what we need to do is we just assemble it dry. So just put the bottom bearing in place and just put the fork up through the head tube like so, and then you want your top bearing on, drop that in place, then we put the associated parts in the headset and any spacers you've got to use for that, and then the cap on the top, and then however many spacers you're going to put on there, and then put your stem on, get that in place. So as you can see there, the amount you've got sticking out that you want to cut off. So if you don't want to cut it down, then you do see people with the spacers and they move the spacers to the top, for instance, even when it is cut down. But you've got to remember, if you've got spacers on top of it and the stem's been lowered down there to make it slammed, and you haven't cut the steerer down, then where this is clamping, if it was right down here and you hadn't cut it down, by the time you put the plug in the top, this is quite a long plug, normally they're a little bit shorter than that even, so if you put that in there, by the time you move the stem down there and tighten it up, you're tightening up, there's nothing inside the steerer tube, so that's when accidents can happen. So I don't recommend ever putting spacers above here, so you've got a big stack of them, and having the stem slam down there without cutting the steerer tube down to suit. And when you mark the steerer tube, remember you've got to allow for the thickness of the top of the plug there, because they rest on top of the steerer tube, so you've got to allow for that as well, so as it comes flush then with your stem. So if you mark it there, you've got to allow for the thickness of that, a few millimeters there under the line that you mark, so as when you actually cut it and drop this in, this will be flush then with your stem. So if you want to cut it there, for instance, obviously you can take, depends on how many spacers you want, so you can slam it right down there if you want, then mark it. So if you just mark it, put a mark on there that you can actually see, then remember to cut that down just under that mark by a couple of millimeters to allow for the compression plug to go in the top. So once you've got it clamped in there just below the mark that you made, you're happy with it, then you can cut through it. So you have the piece cut off. So we'll get this out of the clamp and then clean up the edge if it needs it. So we've deburred the end of the steerer there. So what we want to do is put in your compression plug in the end, depending on what make that you've got. So we get that in there, and then it should have the spec written on it. If not, find out what the spec is to torque it up to. So we just start that off in there, do that up, and then get your torque wrench and set it to the required torque of the plug. And we torque that up. So that's that installed. And we've already got, we greased up the head tube in the bottom and the bearing. We've greased up around the fork there. We've got the bearing in place, sat up in the grease there. We've got the top one in the grease as well, so we can slide it up through. Like so. Always remember, if it's carbon frame, carbon fork, make sure you're using carbon friendly grease for it so it doesn't attack the carbon fibre. So once we've done that, we can just put together the rest of the assembly. So that's it all together there. So obviously you need your top cap on as well. So what you want is, because if you do the top cap up like that there, then it won't be doing anything for the bearings because the top caps are chamfered down like that. So it'll be hitting the top of there. So what you do is you just get a small spacer on the top of the stem and then put in your top cap. So you tighten that down, and then we'll see when we got a wheel in there, we can check the bearings, make sure we're not overloading the bearings. Make sure that it steers nice and freely, it's not binding up at all. So once you've set the bearings, obviously make sure grab hold of the bottom of the fork, rock it backwards and forwards, make sure there's no play in it. When you're doing that up, just nip that up, and just to eliminate the play, don't just tighten that right down. Then once you've done that and you're happy, there's no play in it, then remember to do up and torque up your stem bolts to the manufacturer's spec, whatever stem you've got on there. Just make sure that it is nice and free without any play in it. And also when you've got the bike assembled with the front wheel in it, hold on the front brake and then rock forward and back like that, just to make sure there isn't any play. So if you found the video helpful, remember to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel for more cycle related content. Till next one, ride safe and we'll see you then.